Our sign for the Pride Festival this afternoon says, St. Mark's Palo Alto welcomes everyone to have a popsicle. It's a lighthearted sign, and I am so looking forward to the Pride Festival. We have 200 popsicles to hand out. I think it's the right approach. But when I read the gospel today, I had a funny image. What if Jesus had approached Matthew, the tax collector, with a popsicle? No popsicles, no ice in biblical times. But what if Jesus had come to Matthew and said, "Do you want a popsicle?" The whole picture is silly, but stay with me. It's not just the popsicle. Matthew doesn't belong to Jesus' disciples. Matthew is not just an outsider, he's a sinner. Matthew is a tax collector, and the implication in identifying him as a tax collector is that he's somebody who's cheating the ordinary people. He might be skimming a bit off the top, or cheating by the people by taking more than they actually owe. And even if he wasn't stealing, doing something against the commandments, he was part of a system that was fundamentally unjust, taking from ordinary people in ways that just weren't fair. Matthew shouldn't have been invited to have a popsicle. He doesn't belong because he's not a good person. As I prayed this passage this week, I thought about the times I have judged others as not a good person. I thought about the times I said to my kids when they were little, "You'll be known by the people you associate with. Don't hang out with that crowd," right? Don't hang out with so-and-so. And then I prayed about those times when I thought of myself as not a good person. Matthew's identity as a tax collector or as a sinner is constructed. I wonder what he brought into it. Maybe he defined himself and looked at Jesus and said, "I'm not one of those Jesus types. I don't belong with him because I'm working for the Roman authorities." The Jewish community had boundaries. Good people didn't do certain kinds of work. Good people didn't associate with those folks. Breaking the boundaries wasn't just controversial, it was a sin. But I'm sure Matthew had his reasons for working as a tax collector. What if his family needed the money? What if he had to be an ICE agent because he couldn't get any other work? What if he'd stolen a little because if he didn't, he couldn't get health care for his mom or couldn't take care of his kids? What if the whole system was so unjust that he was never going to get ahead if he didn't collaborate with the Roman authorities? Maybe everyone has a Matthew moment in their life when they face those boundaries. Maybe you wanted to be one thing as a child, but that seemed like an impossible choice. Maybe your parents expected you to follow a certain educational path. Maybe you were supposed to follow in your parents' footsteps. Maybe you were told who you were supposed to fall in love with. Maybe you were defined by your gender. You were supposed to act like this, do these things, associate with these people. And if people all around you tell you you can't, including the church, telling you you can't be, can't love, can't name yourself as who you really are, Reverend Debbie has written so beautifully about this experience of being Matthew the outsider. She talks about growing up in an evangelical church that said women couldn't be leaders. For the LGBTQIA people, the Matthew experience is about a church that says you can't love who you love because that's a sin. You have to choose an identity that accords with some outdated understanding about gender as a biological fact. To express your true gender is not to belong. You don't get invited to have a popsicle because you're not one of us. If your body is different and you have ever been defined as disabled, then you know the Matthew experience. You can't be an athlete. You can't have a family. You're not a good role model. If you're an immigrant, then for sure you've had that Matthew experience. You aren't a real American. You aren't a good son or daughter in the culture of your parents or grandparents. All of us live with identities that are reinforced by culture, by societal rules, by laws. We get messages from our families and from our church about what is acceptable and unacceptable. We get told from when we're tiny children who we have to be, what it means to be a good boy or a good girl. We get told how to play, and even what can be in our imagination. But Jesus breaks the rule. Jesus eats with Matthew. Jesus invites Matthew to follow me. In my prayers, I imagined and found myself giggling with a different pride sign, one that said, St. Mark's welcomes you to follow Jesus. I don't think anybody would come to the table. Hey, you over there, you holding hands with your sweetie, come over here and give up everything to be a follower of Jesus. What was Matthew thinking? Why did Matthew say yes? My guess is that Matthew had been waiting his whole life to be invited. Maybe Matthew had been thinking about this for a long time, and when Jesus said, come, he said, yes. Maybe the person who left church long ago because they felt like they didn't belong is just waiting to hear Jesus say, follow me. For those people who've been rejected by the church or excluded because of their identity, Jesus' call is amazing grace. Jesus says to Matthew, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And Jesus means don't sacrifice who you are. Come, follow me. You don't have to be someone different. You can join me. This is Jesus, the queer Christ. This is a God who loves across all boundaries. This is a radical invitation to belong not by conforming to some rules, but to belong by doing the disciple work of loving out loud, loving into healing. For Matthew, what if this was the invitation he'd been waiting for his whole life? To be in a real relationship with Jesus. Jesus welcomes him not just to have a popsicle, but to be part of the church. To do mercy. To come out. To express himself. Be big, full, alive. Jesus shows Matthew what mercy looks like. The woman with the bleeding disorder, she is included, acknowledged, seen, and healed. Jairus' daughter, the little one who was thought to be dead. She's brought to life and taken by the hand. Jesus invites Matthew to be part of the community that loves across all boundaries. Jesus opens up the church to the ones who've always been excluded. Jesus says, it's not about being a good person. It's about who will follow me. Matthew's transformed by the invitation. He's not a sinner, he's a disciple. From sin to grace. Reverend Debbie has written about this experience in her life, from secret longing to priest in our church. That's Jesus' grace. For everyone who ever felt themselves to be wrong, an outsider, Jesus opening up new life. A hand to the child who, like Jairus' daughter, a cure for the woman defined by her disability. An invitation to the person who thought they could never express their true gender identity. The gay or lesbian person who believes they can't love who they love or how they love. This is the queer Christ who lives intersectionality, who says mercy is what is required. There is no identity that defines who's worthy of God's grace, God's love so big that every boundary that keeps us small is overcome. Every aspect of who we are is seen. Every part that society defines as unacceptable can be seen in a new way as worthy of self-love and God's love, and lifted up as the gift that makes us whole. That's what grace looks like. What begins with an invitation to have a popsicle is really an invitation to be our biggest, most amazing selves in relationship with Jesus and one another. Not about the popsicle. It's an invitation to share in God's mercy, to know Jesus in the acts of loving that do define us. An invitation to participate as leaders, justice bringers, advocates, and healers. Invited to be preachers and teachers, lovers, and the beloveds. Today, we witness God's grace working in Reverend Debbie, bringing her to this moment when she is living into her call to be a follower as an ordained priest in God's church. And today, we hear Jesus' invitation to us to be part of that queer Christ that will not be made small. If you've ever wondered if you really belong, hear the call. Have a popsicle. Follow me. Amen.